With this project, we're going to combine some of the front-end skills that you learned with HTML earlier in the course and some of the coding skills you learned with Python.
This video is brought to you by OppiePie's Academy.
We're going to be using a new language called JavaScript, which looks an awful lot like Python, but works inside the browser. So we're not going to be using the command line here, and instead we're going to be writing HTML combined with JavaScript. So we're going to be writing a calculator program. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my basic document structure, because any web-based document starts with this, even if it has some JavaScript inside to add interactivity. We'll call this calculator. And we'll add our body tags. I'm going to go ahead and save this because, as you'll remember, once we save, we get the syntax highlighting that's so helpful as we write our document. Save this on the desktop. I'll call it calc.html. So we're actually going to have true interactivity here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have the user enter two numbers and then push a button for plus, minus, multiplication, or division to indicate what you want to do with those two numbers. So let's create a small form in which the user will enter their two numbers. So first we have operand 1. We'll put a label here. And then we'll put an actual field where the user can put the number. So input type equals number, ID equals op1. All right, so we've got our operand 1, so that'll be the first number that's part of the math. Make sure we close our quotes here. And then we'll have also operand 2. I have my browser open on the right, so I can kind of check how things look as I go. So let's also load our script into the browser. File, open file, and it's on the desktop. And calc.html. This way we can just kind of track as we go and make sure things are looking the way we anticipated. I'm going to add a break here so these stack up one on top of the other. Great. So now I'm going to add our buttons. So we'll add that under operand 2. So let's do another break. And then we'll have a button for plus. And I'm going to use the ID attribute here to give the button a name, because we're going to be able to access that name through JavaScript. So we'll call that btn plus. This will be minus, this will be multiplication, and this will be division. So btn minus, and let's change the visual for the user. Let's do btn multiply. And also, again, change the visual for the user. Use the asterisk for multiply, just like we do in Python. And then divide, and we use the slash. All right, so that's most of our user interface. We've got a plus, minus, multiplication, and division button. Doesn't look like much, but it'll be functional. And then finally, we need a place for the results. So we'll create a div that will ID as result, and that'll hold the result. Now, obviously, that won't be visible until we actually put something in there. Right now, it's empty, so no change to the visual part of the UI. All right, so now we're going to add our interactivity. Now, in Python, you probably could write this already. In JavaScript, it's a little bit different because we've got to get the values out of these two text fields, and then we're going to have to add, subtract, multiply, or divide, and display the result. Now, one thing to realize when you're working in JavaScript is that the HTML and JavaScript have no idea about each other until you kind of tell them about each other. So we're going to make our JavaScript here inside of script tags. So opening script tag and closing script tag, and in here we'll have our JavaScript. Now, I actually want this initial JavaScript code to run when the page loads. So we're going to write some initialization script. I'll put a comment here that says init. So this initializes the actual program, and this will run when the page loads. So what we're going to do is we're going to say window onload equals function. Now I know this probably looks a little bit cryptic, but all this is saying in JavaScript is when the document window loads over here, we're going to run this function, this code between the curly brackets. We went over functions in Python, so this shouldn't be that different. This function only runs when the window loads. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get our buttons and have them launch certain actions. So when the plus button is clicked, it'll launch a function. When the minus button is clicked, it'll launch a function. So here's how we do that. First, we have to get the button. So we'll use document get element by ID. Now, you'll be doing this a lot as you work in JavaScript. So this is the first time you've seen it. So if it looks a little bit long and complex, don't worry about it. But what we're saying here is from the document, get the element by ID btn plus. So it's essentially getting this whole element on line 21. Now, when we get it, we're going to add an event listener. The event we're listening for is the click event. And when that runs, we're going to call a function called add, which we haven't written yet. Then there's a third argument here, which is almost always false. So here's what the whole thing looks like on one line. So essentially, we're saying here, get the button plus element, right? Document get element by ID, button plus. We're adding the event listener. We're listening for a click that'll run a function add. Last argument almost always false. So let's add our add function here, just like that. All right, so there we go. So now we have to follow this pattern again and get the button minus. Document get element by ID btn minus, add event listener. Pay attention to the syntax highlighting here, because it'll be real easy to tell if you made a mistake because something won't appear the correct color. Now we're going to add the minus function, which will be called when the actual minus button is clicked. So here's the minus button right there. When that's clicked, this function will run. All right, so two more. We've got the multiply and divide. Get element by ID. This is btn multiply. multiply. Very careful with your spelling. And your quotes. These can be single or double quotes. I'm just in the habit of doing single quotes on these lines. Not even sure why. Just been doing it so long. This will run multiply. False. All right. So now we've got just one more in our simple calculator program. So this is for division. Document, get element by ID, btn, let's see what we called it, divide. Sometimes you can copy and paste, and that's actually easier and prevents you from making a mistake. Problem with copy and paste is sometimes you will copy and paste a mistake, and that's often hard to find when you're debugging. All right, let's add our last two functions. So this one is called multiply. Use copy and paste again there. And this one is called divide. So each button, the way we have this structured, each of the buttons in our user interface calls a separate function. So what we want to do in each function is we want to get the values out of here and here, and then perform the appropriate math on them, either addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. So let's get those two values. So op1 is document, get element by ID. We're going to get the op1 ID, that's that element, dot value. And operand 2, document, get element by ID. This element here is op2, right? That's this guy. And don't forget the dot value, because when we just do get element by ID, this part gets the entire element. That's getting this whole thing. We don't want the whole thing. We just want the value inside it. And then we want to add op1 plus op2. And then let's put the results in our result div right here. So we're going to say document, get element by ID, results, and then we're going to set the inner HTML, which essentially puts the pointer right here and inserts HTML. And we're going to put the results inside of that section, so just results. Now, let's go ahead and do a quick test and just see what happens. So let's refresh. Let's do 2 plus 2 plus. Now we get 22. Isn't that weird? Now, I knew that was going to happen, and let me tell you why that's happening. When we use document get element by ID like this, it's getting this value as a string. So it's essentially concatenating the two strings, giving us 22, versus adding them together. But there is a simple solution to this, and that's to convert these to integers or other types of values. So I'm going to use the parse integer function, which is just parse int, like that. So that'll parse the string and essentially cast it as an integer. So if we run this again at this point, 2 plus 2, now we get 4. We get the appropriate result for our calculator. 21 plus 22, we get 43. Now the weakness here is since we're parsing these as integers, we're going to get integer values only. This won't work for floating point numbers. All right, so let's go ahead and use copy and paste. And this time the result is going to be minus, right? And that's really all we have to change because everything else is uniform. This is multiplication and this is division. So right here like that. And we'll save. Now we should have a fully functional calculator. Let's try 4 and 5 and multiply them. Uh-oh, nothing there. Let's try subtracting them. We get -1. Division. So we're not getting anything here on our subtraction or division. Our multiplication seems to be working. All right, so there's our addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. All right, so real common for us to have some type of error. Let's see what happens here. So I see this error. This says BRN multiply, so let's save. And debugging is an important part of programming. So now that we've fixed that, let's try again. 4, 5, multiply, 20. All right, so we've gotten now 3 of our buttons working. 4 plus 5 is 9. 4 minus 5 is -1. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 divided by 5, 0.08. So now we've got everything working in our calculator and we have our correct code. So the things I wanted you to see here was how we can put, using concepts fairly similar to what you saw in Python, plus our HTML to create an application that runs in the browser. And we'll be creating a whole bunch more browser-based applications in this section of the course.